I didn't sleep for 6 months at all. Like it was because think about this in the hospital, especially at Walter Reed, because that's my experience. Uh, I was on 4 hour vitals. Every 4 hours, someone would come in and check my vitals. So like in the middle of the night, when you're finally like about to fall asleep, someone's coming in and checking your vitals. They're waking you up.
Mm-hmm.
And then at 5 a.m. or 4:30 in the morning, all the new doctors would kind of do the doctors would do their rounds. And so like you have all the students because it's also a teaching institute that come in and they walk into your room, they look at your chart, and someone's talking about it. At 4:30 in the freaking morning, I'm trying to sleep at this point, but like there's a like six, I hated it, man. There's like 10, 12 doctors there.
Sounds like hell. Yeah.
Yeah, and so and then during the day you have all sorts of you have to do occupational therapy. You have doctors that come in. I had multiple surgeries. I've had 34 total surgeries, right?
All right. Today's episode of 38 Challenge Podcast is with Medal of Honor recipient Flo Groberg. Flo, man, I appreciate you taking the time away from the family. You have a beautiful newborn boy.
Mm-hmm.
How's that going?
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, he's amazing. He's a baby, obviously, so he's got his days when he just wants to wake up and he chooses violence. But my favorite little moments in my life now is just involving him and my wife and just watching him smile. So it's a game changer for sure.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come out here. Remember the first time we met was on the U.S. or the SS American Victory in Tampa. Remember coming up and shaking your hand and telling you about the mission of the 38 Challenge, and you were all ears and just super present with the conversation, and I appreciate that. And then you went to go to auction off a bottle. Do you remember this? You went to go to, yeah. So kind of backstory on that. So the night before I met you, we were walking through this like networking event at Soft Week, and I saw this bottle of whiskey at a table. I was just going to open old fashioned stand and went up to grab one, and I saw the bottle and I had a flashback, and it was Horse Soldier bourbon, and that was the last whiskey that my brother and I ever had together.
Really?
Yeah. And then the next day, when I met you, we were talking, and you went up to auction off a bottle of Horse Soldier on the stage, and I was like, "Yo, Flo, like that was the last bottle of whiskey my brother and I ever had together." I was like, probably 3 glasses of whiskey deep at this point, so I was feeling confident. And you're like, "Oh, you guys got to hear this. You guys got to hear this testimony." You hand me the mic. So it was for a different charity, and on the
Warriors Ethos,
for Warriors Ethos. So on the shout out Warriors Ethos. I apologize for this, but you hand me the mic, and I was like, "Yeah, like 38 Challenge, like in memory of my brother," and started talking about my own nonprofit while we.
That's the way it works, man.
Yeah, but that was just an awesome time, and then obviously had you at the event in St. Louis or in DFW, and just. Man, appreciate you.
TCU, yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yes, sir, man. We'll get into all that, but dude, I know you. Since we talked in the beginning, you've always been down with the mission, right? Challenging the stigma associated with being vulnerable. And before we kind of get into your story, why don't you kind of tell me what vulnerability means to you?
It's strength, right? I think vulnerability. I've come to understand to me what vulnerability is. It really represents strength, and it's really difficult to be yourself. It's really difficult to share your struggles. It takes a lot of personal courage. And what people can really connect with in a humanizing sense is vulnerability. We all go through really difficult moments. We all go through self-doubt. We all go through, sadness that can come from losing people or sickness, or a professional outcome that you didn't expect, or getting cut from a soccer team, right? Whatever it is, and we are almost at times feel like we have to keep it inside, or we don't want to appear weak. Now take that and times it 100 when you come into like a military setting, right? And things we used to talk about when guys my time in the service were sort of reacting with a weak mind. We used to call them tiny heart syndrome. I used to do that too. I used to judge people. And when I got blown up and I was in that setting where I was in a lot of pain, I was feeling sorry for myself. I remember not only was I feeling for myself, but now I'm a hypocrite because I was judging
Mm-hmm.
those people who, demonstrated vulnerability. And I've come to understand that in my life, uh, being vulnerable has allowed me to create these amazing connections and relationships with people. It's opened up more doors than I'd ever expected. Um, it's allowed me to also help others in ways I never anticipated, never thought I could potentially ever. And what it does, it really provides this whole human element out. And when you see it from the toughest, leaders,
Mm-hmm.
that they're able to step on the stage or in a room and talk about who they are, what they're going through, have gone through, and how they overcame, but be honest about it, you should look around the room and look people's eyes and be like, my God, like if he or she can do it and talk about it,
Right.
what am I ashamed of?
Yep. Yeah, man, and that's the purpose of this podcast. And I had a dude reach out saying like, it's so empowering and so refreshing to see, all these special operators and Medal of Honor recipients, right, sharing their struggles, right, that they went through it too. It's like everyone goes through it, man. And just having the lessons, like you said, teaching these lessons, right, and every day is still a battle, right? Not every day is awesome. People need to understand that. And so we'll get into your story and how vulnerability helped you. And August 8th is an important date for both of us. August 8th is 1989 is when my brother was born, and it's also your alive day, right?
Yeah.
August 8th, 2012, which is just crazy. Well, if you don't mind, why don't you walk us through kind of the events that happened on August 8th, 2012?
Yeah, August 2012, we were in Afghanistan. This was my second tour, eastern part of Afghanistan, the Kunar province. Interestingly enough, that's where I was deployed in my first tour. But on that specific deployment, I was in charge of a security detail for the brigade commander at the time, Colonel Mingus, now Lieutenant General Mingus. And the mission was simple: plan his travels, coordinate those with and his mission plans with the receiving units across 6 different provinces and 45 different outstations, so bases in Afghanistan. And I loved it. I got to see Afghanistan from a really completely different point of view. I got to sit in some really powerful meetings with top leaders and almost better understand the strategy behind what our mission was over there. And I got to meet some really cool people. But on August 8, 2012, that day was supposed to be an easy patrol. We were flying out to the Kunar provincial governor's meeting, happened every Wednesday at the same time. We didn't go every Wednesday, obviously. We didn't want to create a pattern. And it was green. I mean, that area is pretty green in essence, and green meaning that there was not much going on in terms of threat. You're talking about flying into a base that's right by the water, surrounded by the provincial governor's compound and like the police academy, right? So you're kind of you feel like, all right, pretty safe to an extent. But one thing that I learned early on in Afghanistan is it doesn't matter how safe you feel. Every day, is a dangerous day, right? Wherever you go, there's always a threat. So we need that. But on that day, I showed up to FOP Fayez, COP Fayez, and I was expecting to receive an escort of 12 to 15 soldiers. So when I planned the missions, I would call the units the night before and be like, "Hey, tomorrow I'm bringing the boss and these 5, 6, 7 other individuals. I'm bringing my 6th security element. We're wheels up at this time, wheels down at this time. This is his intent. This is what he wants to do. If we're going outside a wire, like we need a minimum 12 to 15 soldier escort." And the plan was that those 12 to 15 are the outer element, and then my 6, we were the inner element, meaning that I would put the principals, the people we're protecting, in a diamond, and I'd have my 4 guys plus 2 protect that. So in case we got attacked, we collapse on the principals, literally, just like Secret Service, exactly what they would do. Like immediately get on the principals, cover them, shield them. Those 12 to 15, they fight the threat, and then we exfil out. right?
Got it.
So that's the whole plan.
Mm-hmm.
On that day when I showed up at that base, there was no element.
Mm.
None of the soldiers were there. And I'd called the night prior. I told them that I'm bringing a heavy element of leaders, 2 brigade commanders and Afghan generals, 2 battalion commanders, 2 command sergeant majors, some GS-15 State Department folks. And the guy that answered was a major, and he said, "Yeah, that's great. I'm going to take the soldiers and I'm going to clear the route prior to arrival." I was like, okay, no. So I put him on mute, took a deep breath, looked at the adjutant for the colonel, and I said, I'm going to ask this guy the same thing. He's probably going to get really pissed off. So I, obviously unmuted, and I was like, sir, I'm literally bringing these folks, and I'm bringing your boss, and your boss's boss. You might want to be there, right? I didn't say that in so many words. I just repeated my request, and he told me to F off. And he's just like, I got this. And I thought, man, this guy, he must be having a bad day. He's going to sleep on it. He's going to wake up, be like, whoa, I might want to be here.
Right.
But I was wrong. And so by the time we landed, I saw no one. And at that point in the military, you adjust, right? You adjust and you adapt to the situation. So immediately I started thinking of plan B. I was pretty fired up. I was thinking plan B. And I saw a bunch of Afghan National Army soldiers smoking cigarettes by the gate. So I told my translator to go to them and tell them that they're coming with us. And I told my platoon sergeant at the time, hey, make sure like you put them up front. You can, you let them know what to do. And then I switched everything. I ran into the base trying to find some soldiers, anyone that was in the chow hall, anyone that was sleeping, right? Just not actually on patrol. And I found one specifically named Sergeant O'Brien, who used to work for me. I woke him up, told him to come with us, and he's still pissed to this day, probably, because he lost half a butt cheek. But anyway, and then I added some civilian guy that worked like their American guy somehow, some way. He had a weapon systems. And then I told Brink, get up front, and I need you to control the pace. And I also want you to keep eyes on the Afghan National Army soldiers because we didn't trust them. And we went on patrol. And about 700 meters into a patrol, we saw 2 motorcycles coming out full speed towards us around this corner. And we were on a bridge, so we couldn't go anywhere. And at the same moment, there were structures right before the bridge, and a guy came out of it. And it was a diversion led by an ambush. And I saw the guy because of my platoon sergeant, who turned around to look at me to make sure I was tracking what was happening with the situation. And instead of looking at me, he started looking to my left, which forced me to look to my left. And that's when I saw that guy. And at that point, I knew that we had a threat. And so I adjusted my mindset immediately. Now, I couldn't see a weapon on him, so I couldn't shoot him. And I sure as heck didn't want to shoot a civilian. But I knew in my head and my heart, every spidey, senses told me
something was off.
Something was off.
Yeah.
So I adjusted my rules of engagements, and I just sprinted towards him. And as he was coming towards us, and I yelled at him, said some nice words to him. And then when I got close to him, I hit him with my rifle. And that's when I felt he had something on his chest. So next I grabbed him. And that's when I realized he was wearing a vest. I saw Mahoney, my radio guy, follow me into it. And then I just yelled bomb. And all I could think about was, I got to get this guy away as quickly as possible, as far away as possible, because he's going to kill my friends. And threw him to the ground, and he landed on his chest. And Mahoney helped me when I was thrown to the ground. So I threw him, and Mahoney was next to me trying to push him down. And when he landed on his chest, he detonated. And, I woke up about 20, 30 feet away, and my foot was facing me. My fibula was out, blood everywhere. My ears were ringing. I was just, in a daze. And I realized that something had happened. I just couldn't remember what it was. So, but I probably stepped in an IED.
Wow.
And the cool thing about it, though, is
so afterwards you had no recollection that you just had thrown the guy.
Yeah, no. Yeah. It took a while.
Right.
It took a while. Like I couldn't. You're in a daze, right?
Yeah.
What just happened?
Right.
But all I could think of was, I must have stepped in an IED, and this is an ambush. And there's like this cloud of dust, right? I can't see anything. And I was like, man, they're gonna come in, so I got to get my weapons. I couldn't find my rifle. So I took my pistol and made sure I had a round in the chamber. I started dragging myself out, and I was just waiting to pop anyone that came towards me. Luckily, the first person that came toward me was my platoon sergeant,
Mm-hmm.
who grabbed me by the handle of my plate carrier and dragged me into a ditch. And then my medic, who had a torn PCL, MCL, and then pretty severe concussion, he saved my life. He applied a tourniquet, and he just, you know, kept me awake.
Right.
The part that makes it the worst day of our lives is the fact that we lost 4.
Mm-hmm.
So a guy detonated a bomb at my feet, and I watched him do it, and I lived. But 4 Americans 20 feet away were killed by the ball bearings that went that direction from that guy. And that's Command Sergeant Major Griffin, Major Gray, Major Kennedy, and Reggie Abdel Fattah. Luckily, the second suicide bomber, there's another one, was about to walk out of that structure, but because we reacted so quickly as a team, we prevented him from actually coming out. So he detonated his bomb inside of the structure.
Oh,
and
wow.
and for about a year, I always thought the second bomber was the one that had killed my friends.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like
Right.
that made the most sense to me.
Yeah.
Like maybe like he detonated in a structure and then the ball bearings from that location went there, but it wasn't. When they did, forensics and things like that, and the investigation came back out, it was like, no, it was that guy. The first one was like crazy. So yeah, that changed my life. My military career, in essence, my combat military career, in essence, ended on that day.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through that difficult period of time after that.
Yeah, man. Let's get into that. I mean, because you had this 8 seconds of courage with every intention that you were not going to live. I mean, if you were probably not thinking about that in the moment, but then you wake up and it's just you. And like you said, the hardest part about it is that you lost 4 of your closest friends and soldiers that day.
Yeah.
So what did the time in the hospital look like after that dark period for you?
What's funny, right? You go through phases. Not funny, but you go through phases. So the first phase is reality check-in, right? Because I mean, think about this. I had so many surgeries. I couldn't. The first 6 weeks, I could not recognize on a picture what a giraffe was. I knew what it was. It would come in and show me pictures of animals, and I'd be like,
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'd be like, that's a cat.
Right.
And then it'll show me a giraffe. I remember a giraffe specifically because that really frustrated me because I was like, I know what this is. I couldn't do simple math. And I was pretty good at math, so I just want to put that out there. But I couldn't do simple math like 2 plus 2. I'd be like, okay, I think that's 4. They're like, okay, well, how many quarters in $1? Wow, right? That's like, I don't know. Couldn't do it, right? Couldn't even write it down. So that freaked me out.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And then I was on oxys, Dilaudid, ketamine, morphine, a bunch, IV Benadryl to go to sleep at night, and I couldn't sleep. Right, so I was in this consistent, this cloud of drugs, of my brain being injured, and then all I could think about was what happened, and because I couldn't recollect what happened on that day. I would stay up as long as I could to try to figure it out, to search it in my head. And that's when at nights, when all the doctors, all the visitors, it's like a freak show, man. So many people walk into your room, just want to talk to you and stuff. You're like, what the heck, But all the doctors are done. It's just you and your bed in the dark. And that's when I started really allow my demons to come in. And my demons would say, it doesn't matter what happened on that day. 4 people died because of you. And then it started playing tricks on, well, what do you bring to the table? You're single. You like to go party with your friends. You play video games. They had, Kennedy had twins, a year old. Gray had 3 kids. Griffin had, Kylie and Dane, right? And Dane was in the army. Reggae had two sons, right? they're gone. They all were like incredibly well regarded people. Like it's kind of crazy, like how impactful every single one of them was. Let's be honest, right? There are just people that just they're there and they're there. Like the whole purpose in their life is just take care of themselves, maybe their families. They're never truly active in the community. They don't bring anything extra, and that's okay, right? That's what as long as you're a good person, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
These all four of these individuals who are actually like leaders in their community, in their church, in their faith, in their trade. You know, I see more people. Heck, I was just at the Air Force Academy 2 days ago to go speak to the cadets, and one of the lead cadre there was a JTAC guy who was there with us, and he's just worked for Gray, and he's just telling me all these stories about Gray. All the people from West Point talk about Kennedy all the time. I will walk through the airport and people will recognize me, not often, right, but occasionally, and they're usually people that work with Kennedy or like were impacted by Kennedy. Griffin, it was one of the greatest leaders I had the opportunity to spend time with. I would literally sit there every night before I would meet with the boss or wait for the boss to kind of like say thumbs up and just speak with him about life, about wrestling, about his kids, about my career aspirations, about what combat meant to him and leadership and stuff. And so he was a mentor of mine, and he was like that for so many people. And so you start realizing these things, and you start telling yourself, well, they died on your watch. You're responsible for this. So here are these amazing people, and what the heck do you bring to the table? Nothing. You're worthless. You're the problem. No one's gonna miss you. Actually, probably people would would trade you for them in an instant. And then you start hating yourself. And then you apply that and you add substance on top of it, right? In this case, substance for me was narcotics that are giving me for pain control. And those demons are just immense, and they overtake every brain cells in your head. And at that point, you're completely defeated because they know you better than you know yourself. They're always one step ahead. And you start to realize that no enemy I've ever fought, Taliban, Chechens, Al-Qaeda, Haqqani Network, anyone I ever fought was as lethal or dangerous than my own brain. And it gets scary because then you start thinking about suicide. And it doesn't matter if you're a Division I athlete. I was a Division I athlete at Maryland when I ran track. You're Ranger qualified. If you've been in 200 plus firefights, you're an alpha type of individual. Your brain will level you in a place that you never thought you could go, and it will destroy you really quickly. And so that to me is where I was at in the subsequent months after August 8, 2012.
So how did you start to fight those demons?
I got lucky. I was in a controlled environment, meaning I was in a hospital. And I had a lot of doctors and nurses around me. And I had a lot of professionals who had seen me over the years, who understood that I was in pain, even though I didn't understand what was going on. And they noticed, but they couldn't get through me. And I think that happens a lot, right? I know the send a psychiatrist in there, and every day a psychiatrist, by the way, very consistent. She would come in and try to talk to me, and I would just be like, so what's this Cubs score today, right? That's all I thought, just Cubs. I'm a Chicago Cubs fan, right? And I wouldn't talk to her about anything because you know what? She never served a day in her life in overseas. In my head, I'm like, you cannot understand anything I'm going to tell you. I don't care if you have PhDs. It doesn't matter. You've never stepped on that land. You've never been in my shoes. So it's impossible for you to truly understand what I'm going through right now. And so that, to me, that was my mindset, right? So I was very dismissive. And luckily, what happened is there's this guy, I don't know if you met him, but you probably heard of him for sure, Travis Mills. And he's a quadruple amputee who was blown up in the same year, in April of that year. And I guess he had heard about me or whatever it was. I don't know how it really happened. But he walked into my room in November of 2012, and in 15 minutes, he just rewired me in a way that you probably didn't intend to or expected. But it was one of those pivotal moments in my life that I always look back and be like, that's when things change. Because I remember him walking in and being with 4 prosthetics with a smile on his face. And it shocked me. And I was like, what the,
Yeah.
like, what is, who's this dude, first of all? And like, holy crap. Like, and he come in and he's just like, we started talking. And he says, I heard you're struggling a little bit. I was like, no, I'm good. He's like, that's fine. You're good. And he's like, just want to let you know, like, the situation that you're facing going forward is you have to represent your brothers and come home. And you have a story of overcoming adversity and beating the odds that is going to impact a ton of people. So I just want to remind you that you have a mission in front of you that's really important. And you have a lot of work in front of you. And that you matter. And that your story matters. And I think in the end, the ones that we've lost will be proud of us for being advocates in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And what he did, which no one else could, because everyone else wanted to explain to me my pain and why I shouldn't feel that pain. He said, forget that. I don't understand your pain. You don't understand mine. It's very unique to you. But I just want to let you know that even though that pain is there, you still matter and you still have a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And so he gave me a glimpse of light in a really dark tunnel. At that point, I felt like, okay, I can still do things to earn it. Right? I can still represent my friends that didn't come home and, and do something that's going to make their families proud. And so part of that was I made a self-commitment at that point that every time I talked about the medal or anything, actually I didn't know about the medal at the time, but anything I talked about my story, August 8th, and my life, I would bring up the guys that didn't come home.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of my friends got me, not this one, but a similar bracelet. And that was the start of my healing journey, which was really not about forgiving myself, but about making sure that I earned the right to still be on this earth,
mm-hmm.
and that I made them proud. And he did that in 15 minutes. Like he was in there maybe 12, 15 minutes.
Right.
He walked out, and at that point I started looking at my injuries and saying, why do you really stop complaining about my injuries? Like I lost 50% of my calf, my definitely left ear, but they fused my foot and all that stuff. But that is nothing compared to this dude that just walked in and then, with no limbs. And if he can smile, what the hell can I smile? Mm-hmm. He's not telling me you should smile because look at me. That's not Travis. Instead, he said, he gave me purpose.
Absolutely. So after those 15 minutes, so this was, how long was this after that Travis?
It was in November.
Okay.
So a couple months.
Months. So what were some of those next steps that you started to take after those 15 minutes and you started to see that light? Like how could you start to see, obviously your mindset was changed, but then what are things that you started incorporating in your day-to-day?
So it took a while, right? There were a couple of things that I didn't know I needed to fix, but needed to happen. One, I needed to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't sleep for 6 months at all. Like it was because, think about this in the hospital, especially at Walter Reed, because that's my experience. I was on 4-hour vitals. Every 4 hours, someone would come in and check my vitals. So like in the middle of the night, when you're finally like about to fall asleep, someone's coming in and checking your vitals. They're waking you up. Mm-hmm. And then at 5 a.m. or 4:30 in the morning, all the new doctors would kind of the doctors would do their rounds. And so like you have all the students, because it's also a teaching institute, that come in and they walk into your room, they look at your chart and someone's talking about it. At 4:30 in the freaking morning, I'm trying to sleep at this point, but like there's I hated it, man. There's like 6, 8, 10, 12 doctors there.
Sounds like hell. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, during the day, you have all sorts of, you have to do occupational therapy, you have doctors that come in. I had multiple surgeries. I've had 34 total surgeries, right? And then you have, psychiatrists, psychologists, you have all sorts of people that come in nonstop. And then you have the priest, and you have just random people from the Warrior Project that came in, and they all good people want to help you, but it takes a toll. And finally, you start to realize, like, I have no freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. Like, people could walk into my room at any moment, whenever they wanted. They could come talk to me, whatever the heck they wanted. I lived in this environment where, like, I needed help to go to the bathroom. I couldn't watch whatever I wanted to watch because, like, or I could technically, but it was the 7, 8 channels that they had there, right? Maybe more. And I said, after a while, I said, screw this, I'll make this my own. So I brought a TV, I brought a PlayStation. I started bringing my own stuff and decorating my room the way I wanted to. I was like, this is gonna be my environment. And then I started telling the nurses, I was like, I don't want anyone in my room.
Mm-hmm.
So they put a note. I didn't know could do that, but like, because I complained to Haley Willis when I was like, why are all these people walking into my room? She's like, oh, you don't want them? I'm like, no. And she's like, cool, no problem. So she put a note. No one else except doctors could walk into my room. I was like, really? I could have done this 2 months ago?
Yeah.
Damn. Like, and so you started adapting to your environment. But one thing I knew right from the get-go is I needed to sleep. So then I became addicted to IV Benadryl because that was the only thing that would allow me to fall asleep. And I can still to this day. Now I don't do drugs. I've just, I don't do substance stuff. Like,
right.
And I haven't drank in 6 months now. Not saying I didn't drink before. We've had our fair share of fun. Yeah. I was drinking that night too when I saw you. So, but I can almost like understand when people like talk about like addiction to a drug. I became addicted to IV Benadryl where like to this day, right now, I can feel the feeling of how I loved it. Because they would put in my veins and it would get cold and it would just pass through my whole body and immediately I would start to relax and I would just fall asleep. And that was my currency. That was gold for me. And so they realized that like, hey, this dude's like always asking us for IV Benadryl, so we need to wean him off that. It got pretty bad because when I became an outpatient, I was trying to figure out how to buy it like offline. Then I went in to the doctor. I was like, I think this is like serious because I'm trying to figure out how to buy it. And he's like, yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But I knew I needed to sleep, and I didn't sleep for a year, like at all, really. Like, I mean, maybe like an hour, 2 hours at a time.
Was this after the Benadryl, or?
Yeah, after the Benadryl. Even with the Benadryl, I only slept for like 2 hours.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. It just let me fall asleep.
Right.
Then I wake up. So it wasn't even really solving the problem. But something crazy happened. Not 2 years. So, and it took 2 years of this. And so they put me on Ambien. And I'm not good at Ambien. Like I just, you know what I am? At least I'm not that bad on Ambien, but my problem with Ambien is I used to stay up and, play games or like watch a movie on my own, right? There's nothing to do. And I'll take Ambien and try to fall asleep. But I wouldn't fall. I would just be thinking. And I guess I was combating that. And then I would get up and start watching infomercials. And then I start ordering like crock pots and stuff. I'm serious, man. I had like a bunch of weird stuff like being shipped. I don't remember. I was like, I watched Montel Williams and I would watch like all these like, all right, for $19.99 and easy 3 payments of $19.99, you can get this crock pot of these. I started ordering all that stuff. And they were like showing up and like, what do I? Like I call on the credit card and like, you guys like, someone stole my credit card. They're like, what are you doing at 4 o'clock in the morning? I was like, oh my God, I think I'm doing this. So, but what I was doing what I was trying to do to recover was I started being honest with myself. I started realizing like I was in pain. And I was trying to figure out ways I stopped playing the game of when I start to remember of trying to change the outcome or playing the game of, well, if I would have done this, this would have happened. If I would have done that, this would have happened, right? And they would have lived, or like I want to trade places and things. So I stopped playing that game and I started being honest with me. It's like, they're dead. They're gone. I'll never forget them. And I'm going to sit there in this rest of my life, but I can't live in this negative mindset forever. So I started being honest with myself. And at that point, I started seeking help. And I didn't realize how I was getting that help. But one thing I really appreciate about Walter Reed is I was surrounded with warriors that had been injured or were going through cancer or whatever that, their situation was. And you would kind of like get in groups together, unsanctioned groups, and just share and talk. And I remember like, wow, I felt better when I would just sort of like tell them how I was feeling to an extent. And so that was my part, but I still wasn't sleeping. And when I wasn't always in this anxiety state, frustration state, because I just didn't rest. And that changed and started October 2014. When I met Carson, my wife. And I knew she was different than anyone else before because the first night that I got to sleep over her apartment, It's the first night in years that I slept for like 6 straight hours
Wow.
without anything.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot my pills. You know, we went out, and I was like, oh, you know, I woke up, and it didn't hit me till I got home. I'm like, hold on, what just happened? And then yeah, and so it's fascinating the power of like of comfort. Um, and she made me feel safe in a weird way. Like I didn't feel unsafe, but like she made me feel like I could be me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think about when I was with her. I didn't think about August 8th. I didn't think about the pain. I was thinking about her, and I started realizing, wow, I don't need Ambien. I stopped thinking Ambien. I just hung out with her all the time. It's a great excuse.
Yeah.
And it started changing my life. And a year after that, and I went in the clandestine sector in the government. I was recruited, and I went to work, and I felt like this sense of duty and patriotism was back. So that helped me too. I felt like I mattered. I was going after bad guys again, and I wanted to earn my spot, right? And then I received a medal, and that ended that career. And so I was almost started to go down. Like if you look at pictures, man, I just stopped working out. Like I had this pressure on me being a recipient of Medal of Honor now, and feeling ashamed of that,
Mm-hmm.
like because in the military.
So you were in a good spot before
Yeah.
the medal, and then you feel like the medal.
Yeah, I was
kind of-
getting in a good spot,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I was sleeping. I was honest. I didn't talk about August 8th unless like I was with some very specific people, but I buried it. Now I'm saying I was in a good spot, but I wasn't healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, what I did is I put it to the side because now I was focused on like chasing Al Shabaab and ISIS and things like that, right? Because I was back in it, so I was burying my pain
Mm-hmm.
and focusing on the mission, right? And I was almost over obsessing in that, like my mission piece. But I was sleeping, so I was like, "That's a win, so I'm good." You start, telling yourself that, and I was like, and I did the whole honesty thing, like I'm good. And then when I received the medal, when President Obama called me and told me I was going to receive a medal, my job told me, "Well, you can't do this job anymore. You can't be in a clandestine sector and have a Wikipedia page."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I disagree. And it's the greatest cover ever. But at that point, it took away that massive passion of mine and what was literally shielding me away from all that pain. And it came back. And now here I was on a pedestal, on a platform, literally singled out uh, for an action where 4 incredible Americans died, where I felt that I failed, and I had to live with that. And so I felt like that was wrong, felt ashamed, felt like a fraud for a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then all those demons started to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And I started, and then there was a tour. And the tour, as you go around different cities, and you talk to, on all these like talk shows, games, throw a first pitch, whatever it is, and go to basketball games, sit in the front. It was cool, but you drink a lot. And then people keep like now I'm talking to a bunch of strangers about August 8th.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't comfortable about doing that. And so you drink a lot. I didn't work out. I started getting like skinny fat, which is the worst thing that ever happened to anyone. Right? I'd rather be fat, like a big guy,
Right.
fat, but skinny fat. Well, it's just terrible.
Where you look good, but except for when your shirt's off in the mirror.
No, dude. Like for me, skinny fat is I had this coming, and like, oh man, like I'm like the worst guy that gets fat. Like I said, I really have to watch it because like it comes all to my face and like right here, it's just horrible. Yeah. Anyway, and my she was my girlfriend at the time, my now wife. Carson was like, you need to like, and she started seeing me getting angry at home, and started to do the binge drinking like crazy. And the frustrations and like I used to like when the doors closed at home I would just go ballistic, not like physically but like in like my words and like my drinking and things like that, and I didn't understand why. And so we did self-therapy to an extent where I no one really knows about this, but like I went to see a therapist for drinking and to understand why I was binge drinking like that. So I wasn't, let me clarify, I didn't come home and drink every night, but when I went out, I would get plastered.
Right.
I had no control,
Mm-hmm.
specifically when I went out with military people. And so she started noticing, and I would come home and be like, this just terrible person to myself. And, I would sit there with terrible things to her, and I wouldn't wake up the next morning. And I remember
Yeah.
And then to apologize. And that is not a recipe for success in any type of relationship. And so I took ownership of that, and I started realizing, okay, that's where I was. And I I met with this therapist for about 8 weeks. It wasn't even long. And what she did was amazing to me is that she didn't tell me to stop drinking.
Mm-hmm.
She just gave me like sort of a a menu of how to drink.
Mm.
It's crazy. Like
Yeah.
it's and what that did is that immediately did not turn me off her because she didn't come in and say
Right. So something's
drinking is
wrong with you.
bad,
Yeah.
blah blah. She said, "Tell me why you're drinking." I would tell. She's like, "Okay, so you're pretty much a social binge drinker with no control." I was like, "Yep, you got me on the head." She's like, "Okay, well, let's do this." She's like, "When you go out and drink, do you take shots?" I was like, "Yeah, all the time." She's like, "Okay, all right. I'm not telling you not to take shots, but like, what? How do you eat?" It's like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Before you go out, to the bar, do you have a full meal, or would you eat a dinner or lunch?" And I was like, "I don't know, not usually." She's like, "Well, let's do something. Um, let's if you know you're gonna go out, have a good meal. You know, put that substance in your stomach, right? Let it try to absorb some of the alcohol, and then if you're gonna do a shot, follow it by water, and
Mm.
use a big glass of water, and don't do another shot until then." She's like, my recommendation is you start restricting those shots, and you can have your drinks, right? And then she's like, but make sure you have food in your system and you're drinking water, and you're cognizant of where you're at. And I was like, okay, so start with a game plan. And then as we got through the weeks, I was like, you know what? I think the shots are the problem.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they are. I
I
mean,
feel good when I'm don't taking shots. Yeah.
geez, it's like
That's
the
that's a great
military.
point.
It's the military thing. It's like it's the sports thing. It's
Yeah.
just like it's shots, right? Everybody's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
"Rah,"
Yeah.
okay. But like, and then you can do like 6 of them in an hour. You don't
Mm-hmm.
even realize it, especially when you're in a setting. And
Oh
next, thing you
yeah.
know, and I was the worst because I didn't brown out. I wish I was like a dude. I go from normal to blacked out.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, like there's a video like she took of me where I'm talking, and 3 minutes later, I can't even like put a sentence together.
Right.
I'm like having a full conversation like we are, and 3 minutes later, I'm like, dude. So I shift, I blacked out, and that's just the worst possible outcome.
Right.
And so I started realizing that was that, but there was a reason behind all that. Is because I was still hurting on the inside, and now I was recipient of Medal of Honor. I was an executive at a big company, and so I shouldn't have problems.
Mm.
I should be like I'm supposed to be the face. And when I went through those 8 weeks, that's when we started really getting more deeper about like where those issues were coming
Why
from
this was coming
and
from.
why this was. And we started with like, let's have a game plan on your drinking to pinpointing what the problem is with that specific drinking to the cause of that action to a solution. And one of the solutions was to really open up to my wife and to find that circle of people where I could just dump. And crazy enough, because of the medal, I started getting asked to go speak publicly, right? A public speaker. And I just
Was that hard at first?
Yeah, I was terrible in my opinion. I mean, people were like, "Oh, you're good," and I watched myself speak. I can't. By the way, I would never listen to this. This thing, I'll never listen to it.
Yeah.
I'll never watch anything I'm on because I'm just too critical, and it makes me whatever.
Right.
And so, but Carson made me listen to a couple of my first speeches, and then a couple of people that I'm really close with who are in the business, were correcting me, and then I went to his coach a little bit, like to just he gave me some pointers because I would get really nervous, but like people wouldn't realize this, but I was that guy, the worst speaker you can possibly have. When you think he's done, for an hour, he just keeps going.
Yeah.
And you're like, and
right when it was wrapping up, another 20 minutes.
And I just couldn't because I didn't know how to end. I didn't have a process in place. And I went to see a coach, and he just gave me a couple pointers. He said, when you are speaking publicly and there's 1,000 people or 50 people in a room, every line that you say, focus on a person. Just find one person in that audience, and you're talking to them directly. It's going to feel more personal to you. And the next line, move to another person. And that really helped me feel more comfortable on stage. And then I started to realize it's therapy. I told a similar story over and over again. I just told my life story, and then over the years, it's grown to my life story, then corporate. It's gone to my life story, corporate community, and then kind of my experiences. But there's always an element of August 8th where I'm able to say the guys' names and boom, like it's therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm honest about myself. I'm vulnerable on stage.
Yep.
I'm talking about the ugliest moments in my life and I'm sharing them with you. I'm being open about it. I'm being honest, and it's therapy. And I started to realize what a platform the medal has provided me. Not only can I talk about my guys, but it's literally saving me from
Mm-hmm.
me. And yeah, it's been crazy.
Dude, it's an incredible story. So when you were going to ask for help, right? Like, how hard was that for you to do? Because I mean, from obviously your past mindset of locking everything in to then kind of unveiling the things that you were locking inside, like how difficult was that asking for help?
Oh, it's incredibly difficult. First of all, it's just like the process of asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
Who to ask from? Who to ask? You know, is one of the topics I had in my head for such a long time.
Yeah.
So you're trying to associate.
Who did you ask?
Well, it's actually funny because one of the first person I talked to was a psychologist at Walter Reed because he was a former infantryman, and he just was super chill, and he never judged me. And I think one of the things I told him when it was done, I said, I really appreciate you because I'd come in and we shoot the shit and we just talk and you'd ask me a couple questions. And, you give me a background of he gave me a background of who he was. And I could understand that he understood. I understood that he understood what it felt like to put the boots on and walk on that battlefield. And I told him, I was like, you are the most impactful person in this hospital right now, in my personal opinion, because this is the hardest part that we have to go through is our mental health, our spiritual and mental health.
Right.
And we can relate to you and I can relate to you. So at least me. And I thank him for that. And so that was the first person. So I almost had a freebie, but I look at my friends who were not in a controlled environment like I was. And that's incredibly difficult. And then you hear the stories like, I don't trust the VA, I don't trust this, I don't trust that. And so they feel alone and they feel like they have no one to talk to. But we always forget that we have a brotherhood and sisterhood element in front of us of the people we serve with. And they might not be going through the exact same thing you're going through, but they're probably going through something similar because a lot of them were in those situations, right? So I had a whole crew of my friends who went through August 8 with me. I'm not the only person that went through August 8. From Mingus, Walrath, through my team, Brink, Ochart, Balderrama, Secor, Mahoney, those guys, and many more, Colonel Powers, and so on and so forth, Newton. I was like, I'm not alone in this. And so when I had the opportunity to hang out with them and we were able to share stories, you start to realize like, okay, it's okay to feel this way. And so you start using, that peer group as your own little crutch, right, towards health. And then you start to realize that you don't have to just stay, in that sector. And I started to be more open about listening to other people instead of wanting to tell my story. So that's why I don't do many of these, right?
Right.
And you start to realize a lot of people hurting for different multitude of reasons, like the way you're hurting, right, with your brother. And that we all have stories, and we should share these stories because your story impacts me. One, it gives me like a sense of hope. It gives me a sense of pride. It empowers me and it keeps me hungry to go do more and support our community because there's so much good that we can do in such dark moments. And when I started to realize that, I started associating with other people in completely different settings than mine that had no association with maybe even the military. And you start to realize like my story can impact them, their story can impact me. And so I started connecting with more people and start building this network of health, of mental health. And the last thing was people who are in the medical field, and knowing that, and that even though I can do everything with talking, that I still need to heal my body. Um, and I started thinking, it's just not the athletic, I mean, the medical field, it's the athletic field too. And this is when, working with Dave Bora and
Oh yeah.
ATF, and what you're doing with 38 Challenge and the other groups, of being able to, you put on a mission of physical, mental health, right? How important those two are to keep you healthy.
Right.
And I started really putting together a process that's, I think, has gotten me to a really good spot today.
That's awesome, man. Thank you for your vulnerability. And I know, as you mentioned, I'm sure it's not something you share a lot, some of those points. And that's what this whole show is about, right? For awesome dudes like yourself to empower people to share their stories. And it means the world. I want to wrap us up. Just a couple questions. One, before the show, we talked about Let's Talk TBI with the Concussion Legacy Foundation.
Yeah.
And your experience, as you mentioned, with a pretty gnarly concussion. My first question is, would you be willing to pledge your brain to Project Enlist so that we can further awareness on how brain injuries are impacting the mental health of veterans?
100%. Absolutely. I'm definitely committed to doing that. Specifically, after going through the TBI checks and the brain imaging that I did recently for my hyperbaric chambers treatment, and just to see the impact of not just that blast, but probably years, right? There was other blasts before, and concussions and drop-in things like that, and just how injured my brain has been, but also the effects of those injuries. And when they connected those about me, like excessiveness, like I'm obsessed. Like I used to get obsessed, like so recently with my grass in Seattle.
Right.
Like, I mean, every day I'd walk outside and I'll just be like,
Yeah.
I'm obsessed. I want to make it perfect. And that's a problem, right? That was a problem. And when we looked at my scans and they did the report, and they're like, that is potentially, I didn't tell them anything about me, right? And they're like, well, we see this trait. Are you feeling like, and they went like to the pinpoint. I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, yeah. Like, thank you. There's a reason.
Right. Yeah. That. So was that comforting, knowing that you had an injury to your brain, and like, you're like, okay, wow, this makes sense.
Oh, it changes everything.
Yeah.
Because you don't know why you're like that.
Right.
You don't know how to fix it. You just think that's you. And you forget who you were before. And now you have it's almost like an answer to your biggest questions. And now you can go figure out a path forward,
right,
to fix it.
Absolutely.
So it gives you hope.
What's that path been like for you?
Well, so step one is I went and did 40 hours, so 40 different sessions of hyperbaric chamber.
Okay.
Those dives were amazing for me. And a couple things, obviously the oxygen and the healing effects, but also the ability to just lay down and disconnect for an hour and 15 minutes every day for 40 straight days. Well, that's not true. It's not 40 straight days. It was 5. I did it 6 days a week, so with 1 day off. So whatever amount of weeks those were, and I was able to, over the course of those, 5, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, just set a game, like a game plan, right? And and then on the 8th week, you're kind of like, or the 7th week, you're kind of like, I feel different. Right. I really feel different.
Yeah.
Like, I am not as excitable. I don't feel obsessed with, the pool, and the plants behind the pool are dead. My cactus my cactus died over this winter. It gets so freaking cold. A year ago, I was losing my mind.
Right.
Because I'd be like, that cost me $3,000, and that's $2,000 I can't take back. And now I got to put this. Like, what am I supposed to do now? Like, do I put new cactus? Now I'm just like, all right, cool. We're probably going to go with plastic plants going forward. Right, you know what I mean? Like, and I can take a deep breath. My most important aspect is I have a newborn, right?
Right.
Orden, who was, going to be 12 weeks on Monday. And I was like, I need to be better. I need to figure out a way to really like fast forward this healing process, because I know I'm about to enter an environment where he's going to cry a lot, and I can't be irritated like that. And thank the Lord that we did it at perfect timing, because my wife's been able to go, tell me, like, honestly, be like, I'm so impressed by you because you handle him so well. And even though, like, and you recognize when you're about to get irritated and you're kind of like, settle yourself down.
Right.
And last night was one of those perfect examples where we did, she went out with her friends for dinner, and I was like, I'm babysitting. And it was like boys' night out in the house. And we have a nanny, and so she can, like, a video, and we can hear and see and things like that. And we just gave him a bath, and he was, after the bath, he was crying. And I didn't realize she could actually hear, because she gets like a notification. She could hear our conversation. And then when I went to bed, and then when she came home, we went to bed. She's like, Flo, I just want to say I'm really, like, proud of you. Like, you're so good with him. I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, oh, I could hear you talking to him when he was crying. And you're, like, so comforting and loving. And I was like, it's cool, dude. Like, you got this. I cried out. And I was like, yeah. She's like, I don't think you would have been that guy a year ago. I think you would have been just really frustrated, and because you can't figure out how to make him stop crying.
Right.
And you would think you're failing. And that would have frustrated you. And I was like, you know what, man, it's part of this process. So Hyperbarics Chamber has been huge. And then working with Dave, and, he's got all these connections in these groups and these folks. And next, I'm going to be hopefully talking to one of the doctors that was working with Tom Brady. I think you know what I'm talking about, out in Massachusetts. Maybe not. No. She did the TB12 thing. And so she does this, like, holistic, sort of like check on you from, head to toe, and, so all the tests, blood tests and everything, scans and mental health. And she really creates this package of well-being package that you follow. And it's been amazing for professional athletes and so many folks and some veterans that she's been able to see. So I'm looking forward to starting that.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I'm excited to hear about your continuing on this journey of healing and just, becoming the best version of yourself.
It's life, man.
Yeah, exactly, man. Last question for you. First, obviously you're at the 38 challenge in DFW. What was that environment like for you?
Oh, it's fun. First, I didn't know what to expect, right? First of all, the workout is a lot more challenging than I expected. It doesn't sound that bad. It's like, I'll run a quarter of a mile. I'll do these, push-ups, and I'll do these sit-ups, and there's all stuff here. Okay, it doesn't sound that bad. And I was like, holy macro. Then I got super competitive.
Yep. You were busting it, dude. Like, yeah, you were.
Yeah, I was moving. I'd say I was in top 5%, but I was way behind 100%. That one guy. There was one kid, like, who's just like a monster. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
I think, yeah.
Dude, it was, and he's like, he told me at the end, he's a former Marines. He told me at the end, he's like, yeah, I couldn't let an Army guy get to me. And I was like, bro, I quit like halfway through trying to get after you. Like,
right.
But it was an amazing environment, because I saw a lot of my friends, but also a ton of people I've never met. But the fact that you brought in all these different nonprofits, you were talking about the 38 challenge, the impact your brother, impact his head on you and what you're trying to do. But you brought in these different nonprofits in the community, and you highlighted them. And what I loved about the fact is something that I created when I was running the philanthropic side of Boeing on the military side is I only believe in umbrellas of organizations that wanted to work together to make an impact. And the fact that, you've at such a young age, and you're so mature in a sense of understanding how you want to take how you want to impact people, that you understand the power of teamwork, right? And grouping these teams and these groups there, bringing Clint to speak, which obviously was amazing. You brought a community, and then you put us through a difficult workout, and you obviously, which was adaptable to folks, who potentially couldn't do some of the movements or do the running and things like that. But you brought us in an environment where it's competitive but supportive, where people probably hadn't done any type of workout in years of their lives, but here they are, and they're motivated by it. And then finally, it's the sense that you probably judge yourself, or you feel like, I can't do this, and then you come into that setting, and then you have a purpose to do the workout, and then you look around, you're like, this person's doing it. Like, I should be able to.
You see the ATF athletes.
You see the ATF athletes, missing limbs, blind, whatever it is, and you're kind of like, wow, like, I shouldn't give myself an excuse, and I probably need to get my game,
right?
And so that to me was incredibly powerful. And I don't know. I don't know if I could do the workout like you did, like every single day and things like that. And the
I don't think
vest.
I'll ever do that again either. Yeah, that messed me up pretty good.
By the way, I didn't do it with a vest. Those guys were doing it with
This-
vests, which was ridiculous.
Yeah, this year maybe we'll throw one on you.
When is it this year?
We're still working on the date.
So we're gonna, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be mid-July though.
Well, good news is I'm getting back to like some real hardcore CrossFit. Hardcore, it's just a joke. But in my world, hardcore CrossFit, which means just going to a CrossFit gym.
Right.
So there's one that opened right in front of my house. So
hell yeah, man.
I'll be stronger.
Perfect. Dude. Looking forward to it. Last question. You kind of just wrapped it up. But if you could explain what the 38 challenge means to you, what would you say?
I mean, saving lives. That's what it means to me. It's an environment where if I'm struggling, it challenges me to be outside of my comfort zone, but most importantly, it connects me to people who I potentially need to go talk to and share stories with and listen. And I think it saves lives. It highlights an incredibly difficult topic with suicide, and it takes away the stigma behind it, and it creates an environment in the community. And in the end, a lot of our folks who take their lives feel like they're no longer part of the community, and they don't bring the value, and the pain's too much, and no one will understand. And I think what you do and what the 30 Challenge does is it removes that stigma, it brings us together, it opens up the conversation, and it introduces us to people who potentially can save our lives.
Awesome. Thank you, brother, for opening up. Thank you for being vulnerable and for your support. I know we'll be doing a lot of awesome things together. Just appreciate the man that you are and our friendship.
You too, brother.
Awesome.
You and your team.